My name is Renee Johnson. I'm a 65-year-old single mother living in Tampa, Florida. I've been living alone since I lost my husband, George, 2 years ago. Our 35-year marriage was happy with hardly any arguments. But the loneliness after losing him has been a heavy burden for me. I have 2 children, my son Michael and my daughter Ren. They're both married and independent. Michael lives out of state, so I don't see him often. But Ren and my 5-year-old granddaughter, Ray, live just a 10-minute drive away and visit frequently. Ray is as cute as a doll, with fair skin and big eyes. She looks just like Ren did when she was little. Ren's husband, Kyle, is a teacher at the local high school. He's 10 years older than Ren and apparently popular with the female students due to his movie star looks. I was awakened around 2 a.m. by the sudden sound of a FaceTime call. On the screen was my granddaughter Ray's face, looking like she was about to cry. "Ray, what's wrong, calling so late?" I asked, still groggy. "Grandma. Mommy says the baby's coming. Help." Ray's voice was trembling. I was instantly wide awake. What? Already? There should still be over a month to go. Where's your dad? Tears welled up in Ray's eyes. He kicked Mommy's tummy and left. My heart froze. I understand, Ray. I'll be right there. What should I tell Mommy? Mommy says it hurts. Ray's voice trailed off. Okay. Ray, you're a brave girl. Stay with Mommy. Grandma will be there soon. After hanging up, I hurriedly started changing clothes. My mind was in chaos, but I knew I had to act fast. I picked up my smartphone and opened the Uber app. Thankfully, despite the late hour, there was a car nearby. "Are you in a hurry?" came a message from the driver. I replied, "Yes, it's an emergency." While waiting, I tried calling Ren several times, but there was no answer. I tried Kyle too, but couldn't get through. 5 minutes later, the Uber arrived. "Good evening," the driver said, but I just nodded slightly and jumped into the back seat. "You seem to be in a hurry," the driver said. "Yes, my daughter." I choked on my words. There was no time to explain. "Please, just hurry." The car made its way through the quiet residential area. As the streetlights cast their orange glow, my anxiety continued to grow. Was Ren okay? The baby? And Kyle? 15 minutes later, we finally arrived at Ren's house. "Thank you," I said, and quickly got out of the car. I rushed to the front door and knocked. "Ray! Run! Open up! It's Grandma." No answer. With growing anxiety, I put my hand on the doorknob. The door was open. I entered without hesitation. "Ray! Run!" I called out as I made my way down the dark hallway. When I entered the living room, I gasped at the sight before me. Ren was lying on the floor. Her face was pale, with cold sweat on her forehead. Ray was holding her mother's hand, sobbing. "Run! Are you okay?" I rushed to my daughter's side. Rin answered in a weak voice, her face contorted with pain. "Mom, the baby, it hurts." I put my hand on Ren's forehead. She didn't seem to have a fever, but she was clearly unwell. "I'll call an ambulance." I took out my smartphone and dialed 911. The operator's voice came through. 911, what's your emergency?" "My daughter is 8 months pregnant and in pain. There's a possibility of premature labor," I explained as calmly as I could. "Understood. We're dispatching an ambulance right away. Can you give me your location?" I gave them Ren's address. The operator explained what to do until the paramedics arrived. After hanging up, Ray clung to me. "Grandma, is Mommy going to be okay?" "It'll be all right, Ray. The doctors will be here soon," I said, hugging my granddaughter. Ren was breathing with difficulty. "Mom, Kyle, Yee. Don't think about that now." I held my daughter's hand. "Just focus on the baby and your body." A few minutes later, we heard the sound of sirens. I opened the front door to guide the paramedics inside. The paramedics quickly began assessing Ren's condition. "Her blood pressure is a bit high. The fetal heartbeat is unstable," one of them said. "We need to transport her to the hospital," another told me. "Will you come with us?" "Yes, of course," I answered. "I'm bringing Ray too." Ren was placed on a stretcher and loaded into the ambulance. Ray and I climbed into the back seat. As the ambulance started moving, one of the paramedics asked Ren, "Ma'am, when did the pain start?" Ren answered weakly, "This morning, but it got really bad in the evening." "Any idea what might have caused it? Did you fall or bump into something?" Ren hesitated for a moment, then shook her head. I didn't miss the change in her expression. The ambulance sped towards the hospital. I held Ray close, staring out the window. The streetlights were passing by in a blur. "Grandma, is Mommy going to be okay?" Ray asked anxiously. "She'll be fine," I answered, but I couldn't be certain of my own words. 15 minutes later, we arrived at the hospital. Ren was immediately taken to the obstetrics emergency room. Ray and I were told to wait in the waiting area. "Your daughter's condition is critical. There's a high possibility of premature birth," the doctor told me. "We'll do everything we can, but please be prepared." I nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. Ray held my hand. "Grandma, I'm scared." "It's okay, Ray," I hugged my granddaughter. "We need to be strong for Mommy." The clock in the waiting room ticked slowly. I spent the long night praying for my daughter's safety and worrying about the future of my grandchildren. It was past 3 a.m. when a nurse finally came to us. "Mrs. Johnson, your daughter is still undergoing tests. We'll need you to wait a bit longer." I nodded with a worried expression. "I understand. Thank you." After the nurse left, I turned to Ray. My granddaughter was curled up on the sofa, looking exhausted. Ray, can we talk for a bit? I gently asked. Ray nodded slightly. I sat next to her and put my arm around her. Ray, can you tell me a bit more about what happened tonight? About your dad, too. Ray began speaking in a trembling voice. Daddy, he's been fighting with Mommy a lot lately. Today, too. And then I prompted. Daddy came home, and he was really angry. He had a big fight with Mommy. Tears welled up in Ray's eyes. Then Daddy kicked Mommy's tummy. I felt my chest tighten. Did your dad kick Mommy's stomach? Ray nodded, crying. Mommy said it hurt, but Daddy just left. I hugged my granddaughter. Ray, thank you for telling me. You're a brave girl. After comforting Ray for a while, she fell asleep from exhaustion. I took out Ren's cell phone. She had given me the passcode for emergencies. When I opened the phone, there were no recent calls from Kyle. Instead, a name, Jessica, appeared multiple times. Checking the SMS, I was horrified by the messages I saw. Don't come tonight. You're a noisy woman. If you need money, just say so. But I don't want to hear about the baby anymore. How many times do I have to tell you to get a divorce? My hands were shaking. Was this the situation my daughter had been in? Why hadn't I noticed? Opening the photo folder, I found several pictures of bruises and injuries on Ren's body. The dates spanned the past few months. I felt sick to my stomach. I put the cell phone back in my pocket and took a deep breath. I tried calling Kyle, but again there was no answer. I left a message on his voicemail. Kyle, it's Renee. Ren's been hospitalized. Contact me immediately. At that moment, I remembered something from a few weeks ago. Ren's best friend, Samantha, had approached me with a worried look. Mrs. Johnson, I'm worried about Ren, Samantha had said hesitantly. What do you mean? Kyle, he's been acting strange lately. I've seen him with the new English teacher a lot. Are you suspecting an affair? I can't say for sure. I tried to talk to Ren about it, but she didn't want to believe it. Back in the present, I let out a deep sigh. I should have taken it more seriously then. The nurse approached again. Mrs. Johnson, your daughter's tests are finished. The doctor would like to speak with you. I stood up. I understand. I gently woke Ray, and we headed to the consultation room. The doctor greeted us with a serious expression. Mrs. Johnson, I'll explain the situation. Ren is currently in a state of threatened premature labor. The fetus is also showing signs of distress. I gasped. What does that mean? We've found multiple bruises on Ren's body, especially around her abdomen. The doctor was choosing his words carefully. This suggests the possibility of domestic violence. I closed my eyes. My worst fears had been confirmed. We're currently working to stabilize Ren and the fetus. However, depending on the situation, we may need to consider an emergency C-section. I understand, I answered in a shaky voice. Can I see my daughter? Yes, for a short time. As we left the consultation room, Ray looked up at me with anxious eyes. Grandma, is Mommy okay? I hugged my granddaughter. Mommy is fighting hard. We need to be strong too. When we entered Ren's hospital room, my daughter was lying there weakly. I took her hand. Ren, are you okay? Ren nodded slightly. Mom. I'm worried about the baby. The doctors are doing their best, I tried to reassure her. Ren, what happened? Tell me the truth. Tears welled up in Ren's eyes. Kyle. At that moment, Ren's expression contorted in pain. It hurts, she cried out. Alarms went off, and nurses rushed into the room. Please wait outside, a nurse ushered us out of the room. Just before the door closed, I heard the doctor's voice. Prepare for an emergency C-section. I held Ray close, waiting with a prayerful heart. As anger towards Kyle and worry for Ren mixed together, the sun was beginning to rise. In front of the operating room, Ray and I waited with bated breath. The morning sun was beginning to shine through the hallway windows, casting a warm light on the hospital's white walls. However, even this light couldn't ease our anxiety. Grandma, is Mommy going to be okay? Ray asked in a small voice. I hugged my granddaughter and answered, Your mom is strong. She'll be fine. Even as I said this, my heart was filled with worry. Kyle's violence, Ren's suffering, and the emergency C-section happening at this very moment. It all felt so sudden, so unreal. After 2 hours, the operating room door finally opened. The doctor approached us with a tired expression. Mrs. Johnson, he said. Yes, I stood up. My daughter. The baby. The doctor took a deep breath and said, the baby was born safely. However, due to being premature, we've taken her to the neonatal intensive care unit. A moment of relief. But the doctor's expression suggested there was more to come. However, Ren's condition is extremely critical. We can't stop the bleeding. My mind went blank. Can I see Ren? Yes, but time is limited. I took Ray's hand and headed to the ICU. Ren was lying there, surrounded by numerous machines, her face pale. Ren. I took my daughter's hand. Ren slowly opened her eyes. Mom, the baby. She's safe. A beautiful little girl, just like you, I answered, holding back tears. A look of relief passed over Ren's face. That's good. Ray is here too, I brought Ray closer. Mama! Ray cried out. Ray! Mama's treasure, Ren smiled weakly. Mama loves you, so much. Ray held Ren's hand, crying. Ren looked at me and said in a faint voice, Mom, please. Take care of Ray and the baby. I understand, I nodded. Don't worry. Ren closed her eyes, seemingly at peace. At that moment, the heart monitor began to sound. Run! Run! I cried out. Medical staff rushed in, and we were ushered out of the room. 30 minutes later, the doctor approached us with a sorrowful expression. My deepest condolences, he said. With those words, my world crumbled. Amidst our grief, a nurse guided us to the NICU. In a small incubator, the newborn baby was sleeping. She's a very strong girl, the nurse said. But we'll need to keep her here for observation for a while. I placed my hand on the incubator, feeling the heartbeat of this tiny life. Your mama loved you very much, I said. Ray stood next to me, peering into the incubator. Grandma, is this my sister? Yes, Ray. This is your beautiful little sister. At that moment, I made a decision. To fulfill Ren's last wish, would protect these children with all my might. After leaving the NICU, I headed to the hospital chapel. There, I sat for a long time, praying. Praying for Ren's soul, worrying about the future of my grandchildren, and asking for strength for myself. When I left the chapel, the sun had fully risen. The start of a new day. But our lives had changed dramatically. I took out my cell phone and saw several missed calls from Kyle. How should I confront him? Should I report him to the police? Various thoughts raced through my mind. But now, I had to prioritize Ray, who was right in front of me, and the baby fighting for her life in the NICU. Taking a deep breath, I began walking down the hospital hallway. Amidst a mixture of grief and determination, I was about to take the first step into a new life. 3 days had passed since Ren's funeral. I was going back and forth between the hospital and home, taking care of the baby in the NICU and looking after Ray. In the midst of these grief-stricken days, I finally received a call from Kyle. I'm coming to the hospital now. We need to talk about the baby. His cold voice filled me with anger. However, I needed to remain calm. I was waiting for Kyle in the hospital lobby. When he appeared, I gasped. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, and he reeked of alcohol. Kyle, I called out quietly. He ignored me and headed towards the reception desk. Where's Ren Johnson's baby? He demanded. As the nurse looked confused, I intervened. Kyle, let's talk first. He looked at me irritably. What? Make it quick. We moved to the hospital courtyard. The soft morning sunlight felt incongruous with this heavy atmosphere. Ren is gone, I said quietly. Because you hurt her. Kyle grimaced. Don't talk nonsense. She probably just tripped on her own. Don't lie, my voice trembled. Ray saw everything. His expression faltered for a moment, but he quickly composed himself. You can't trust what a child says. Kyle, you were abusing Ren. I have evidence. What are you talking about? He couldn't hide his panic. It's all on Ren's cell phone. The photos, the messages. Kyle's face turned pale. However, he quickly turned aggressive. That doesn't prove anything. I have parental rights. I'm taking the baby. I won't let you, I said firmly. He sneered. How do you plan to stop me? At that moment, I made my decision. I'm going to report this to the police. And I'll fight you in court. Kyle looked shaken for a moment, but then put on a defiant face. Do what you want. He turned on his heel and quickly walked away. I took a deep breath and considered my next move. That afternoon, I visited a local domestic violence support center. It was a small building called Sunshine House. After explaining the situation at the reception, a counselor named Jane came to assist me. She greeted me with a warm smile. Renee, you're in a difficult situation. But you're not alone, she said. Jane's words brought tears to my eyes. I realized I had been trying to handle everything on my own. What should I do? I asked. First, let's report this to the police, Jane said. Then, we'll get a lawyer and file for guardianship. Following Jane's instructions, I visited the police station that day. Detective Brown, the officer in charge, listened to my story seriously. You say you have evidence. I handed over Ren's cell phone. Everything is here. Detective Brown nodded. We'll start an investigation. Kyle Anderson will be called in for questioning. Those words gave me a sense of relief. The next day, I met with lawyer Sarah Morris, whom Jane had recommended. Renee, it might be a tough battle to gain custody of your grandchildren, Sarah said frankly. I'm prepared, I replied. Good, Sarah smiled. Then let's start preparing the petition. The following weeks felt like being in the middle of a storm. Police investigations, meetings with the lawyer, and hospital visits. In between all that, I had to take care of Ray. Finally, the day of the initial hearing in family court arrived. As I entered the courtroom, I saw Kyle sitting with his lawyer. He was staring at me with cold eyes. The judge entered, and the hearing began. Today, we are holding a hearing regarding the custody of Ray Anderson and the as-yet unnamed newborn, the judge announced. Sarah stood up and began explaining the situation. The evidence of Kyle's abuse, the cause of Ren's death, and my willingness and ability to take in my grandchildren. Kyle's lawyer tried to argue, but the weight of the evidence was clear. As the hearing ended, the judge made a provisional decision. At this point, I grant temporary custody to Renee Johnson. Kyle Anderson's visitation rights will be restricted. I let out a sigh of relief. This was just the beginning, but it was an important step. As we were leaving the courtroom, Kyle approached me. This isn't over, he threatened in a low voice. I looked straight back at him. You're right. But justice will prevail. That day, when I returned to the hospital, I looked at the baby sleeping in the NICU and made a vow. Ren, I promise. I'll love and protect these children enough for both of us. The next morning, as I woke up with the sunrise, I felt a new determination in my heart. While making coffee in the kitchen, I glanced at the calendar. Today, our new life begins. I heard Hope crying, and Ray called out, "Grandma, Hope is awake." I smiled. Coming. Yes, this is our new normal. There will be challenges, but a future full of hope awaits us. The story of our new family begins here.